Hey, it's good to see you. This is the Day After podcast. My name is Philip Thomas, here with Tom Burns with the Redeemed Idiot. The Day After podcast is we're kind of looking back at the previous week's sermon, and so we've been continuing the Sermon on the Mount at Journey Church in Elgin. We meet at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings. We'd love to have you come. And we're going through the Sermon on the Mount. We're getting to the point in chapter 6. We're halfway through and kind of went through the rest of chapter 6. So talking about laying up your treasures in heaven, rather than on the stuff that gets destroyed here. And do not be anxious, which I thought was interesting that Jesus had those back to back. But what were your thoughts or any questions that came to your mind?
Wow. I mean, they both make a lot of sense. Anxious.
Mm-hmm.
When it talks about the birds in the air, they don't have to worry about their food.
Yeah.
They don't reap, nor do they sow. Putting that into perspective of us today, of not being anxious, because that's why we work.
Yes.
That's why we do things. Like, I want to make sure I have a job. I want to make sure I eat. I mean, you go back to COVID.
Yeah.
It's like people lost everything, and where were they getting food?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what do you think? Is it what I mean, that is something we all have to deal with. But I don't think the message is sit back and just worry.
No.
Some man's going to fall from the roof of your house, and water company's going to come in and put water in your house and give you some sodas.
Right. Yeah. No, definitely not. And in fact, if you don't work, you are going to reap the consequences of that, right? Life is going to be more of a struggle for you. I think what Jesus is getting at here is understanding what the truly important things are. And so he really, by talking about the sparrow, talking about the flowers, he's really bringing this down to a base level of, listen, the things that really matter are if you have a place to live and food to eat, right? That's the basic. The reality is most of us are not anxious about that. We are anxious and worrying about other things, right? For example, I think most people, especially in our culture today, because we are inundated with stuff, right? All of us. Most people would consider not having access to a cell phone as a life-altering, thing. Is that something that we should worry about, not having access to a cell phone? In our culture would say yes, but is it really? No. And I think Jesus is trying to get us to change our perspective on recognizing what is truly important and what is not. And he's telling us a very strong truth that if our focus is just to accumulate the stuff, that's never going to get us to a place where we actually find peace or are appreciative or, fill that hole. It will never happen, no matter how much stuff you try to accumulate. It's never going to provide what you want it to. That's why he says, seek first the kingdom of God, and then all these things will be added unto you. So if I think so many of us, we try to fill the holes of peace by working really hard, getting a big bank account, having a good security system at our house, and then we're like, okay, now I can be at peace. No, it doesn't matter, because you realize, wait, I can't prevent everything. Well, the stock market just dropped. My bank account just went down. Oh, the security system on my house doesn't work like I thought it was going to work, right? I'm still not safe, so that I can't be at peace, right? Many of us accumulate stuff because we think it'll make us joyful. It'll make us happy, right? Oh, if I only had that next size TV, that's a bad example because TVs are cheap now. Used to, right? And you're like, oh, I wish I could get that 80-inch TV, but I don't have $5,000. Well, now you can get that for like $500.
Right.
But no, always seeking stuff to make us feel joyful, to, all of those things that we're seeking. If we are trying to find that meaning and that purpose from the stuff that we are buying, it's only going to cause us anxiety. It's not going to give us what we really want. So what Jesus is saying, seek first his kingdom, right? And then you will find joy. You will find peace. You will find meaning. You will find purpose. And that is something that cannot be shaken. That is firm because it's rooted in Christ, who will never change, who will never be taken away. If you are trying to find all of that stuff in the stuff that you're doing and worldly things, and that doesn't mean that the worldly things are bad, right? He's not saying don't work hard. He's not saying don't earn a big living. He's not saying any of that. He's just saying if your reason for doing all of that is so that you can find meaning, purpose, joy, peace, you're never going to find it there. And you are going to be in a constant state of worry and anxiety because you know it's built on something that is not real, which is why he says, seek first his kingdom.
Oh, so this, okay. So you think what you're saying, that Christ is kind of saying here, goes back to what you've been saying, is that audience of one, it's about focus.
Yeah.
Where's your focus? I mean,
and your intent, right? Your intent of, you know, why are you doing what you're doing, right? And it can be twofold, right? You know, you can start a new career, start a new business with the hopes of building wealth and building financial security. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you keep perspective that, hey, no matter how successful this business is, it's not going to fulfill my most basic needs, which come from God, right? Again, those needs of finding meaning, of finding purpose, of finding hope, of having something that is secure even in the storms of life, right? That is going to be our relationship with God, and that is the starting place. And then we can move, and there's nothing wrong with people gaining wealth, and there's nothing wrong with stuff. I do think as Christians we should look at that. It's like, how much stuff do we really need, right? But we shouldn't overly stress about that either, because so we can take this to the point that we feel guilty about every purchase that we do, right? I don't think that was Christ's point here either, because again, back then when he's saying this, they didn't have access to stuff, right? You know, they weren't, you know, the normal person that would have been listening to this sermon, you know, isn't going to be able to go out and just buy frivolous stuff.
Very minimalist.
Yes, that's all, you know. And so we have to get to the heart of the principle. And I do think this teaching is one of the ones that is much more difficult for us in 2025 to really wrap our minds around and our hearts around than it would have been 2,000 years ago, because we have been convinced that we need all of this comfort and we need all of these luxury that we consider luxuries, right? That no other generation of people have ever had, and they somehow made it. And we kind of live like, man, how would we function if we didn't have this? Well, maybe like the rest of humanity for the last 6,000 years, right? But we're in a unique place, because if I lost this phone, I would have some anxiety, right? And so again, it's just recognizing what is really important, because it is a slippery slope once you start to try to find meaning and purpose in the stuff that you have, those treasures on earth, right? And so that can include money. It includes our relationships, right? Like if we think that our family relationship is going to be what always gives us joy and peace and happiness and security, guess what? That can be blown up in a day. With one tragedy changes that whole thing, right?
Right.
And so again, just making sure we're starting at the right point.
Right. And when you mentioned like the kind of minimalist mentality, or not just mentality, lifestyle back then, do you think this may have obviously applying to everybody, but a relaxing message to those that didn't have things, because a lot of those that didn't have things, there was the oppression going on then, from the Roman Empire, and even from Jews down to just the normal, average, everyday Joe, the Greek peoples and all this. But they were all trying to accumulate that element of wealth. And if you weren't a Pharisee or higher in the church or the temple, then you were just kind of like this little layman person that didn't get by.
Yeah.
Do you think there was a message behind this, or what his intent may have been, was to say, look, where you guys are at is just fine.
Yeah.
And then, hey, but you guys up here, you guys are looking in the wrong direction.
Yeah. I think there's definitely some of that, of being content wherever you are. Now that, again, that doesn't mean that you can't strive to move out of your whatever circumstances you are. But yes, be content with where you are. And you're exactly right. Most of the people in that day were on the bottom rung, right? This idea of the middle class and stuff like that, this is a relatively new idea, right?
Right.
And back then, you were either the elite and had no concerns at all financially, or you were just the base level, right? It was just surviving. And I do think there's part of that Jesus is saying, listen, your wealth, it has to come from your relationship with me. That's how you have to start viewing it. That it's a different kind of wealth. Yes, it's it's the things that really matter come from me, and you can have that no matter your station in life, right? And so be content with where you are, but also know that God wants you to continue growing and continue making a difference in His kingdom, and we can do that in lots of different ways, and it may end up bringing us material wealth. But then we always need to remember where that is ultimately coming from, that's coming from Him. And again, this is a tough one for us today, but it would have been for them as well, because most of us today, we wouldn't consider ourselves wealthy, right? Because we're always looking where? At the next level of wealth. So and it doesn't matter where you are in society, there's always an easy example of someone who's on this level of wealth, right? And that's what we look at. And so we always think, well, they're the wealthy ones. They're the rich ones, not me. And we don't look at the fact that, wait, we have a car to drive. We have a house to live in. We have food. We have a cell phone, right? We're actually more wealthy than the vast majority of the world. But we get caught into always focusing on, oh, what's that next level that I can reach? And that creates that anxiety, right? Because you're always striving to reach something that many times it may be even out of your control. And then once you get there, guess what? You're looking at a different level of wealth, right? And then you can easily get into that trap. And in the back of our minds, we all know that this can fall apart at any time. And so Christ is trying to free us from that level of anxiety. This is not a teaching about whether you should accumulate wealth or whether you should make money. This is a teaching about what are you seeking? What is your foundation? Where is your starting point? And that 6:33, seek first His kingdom and His righteousness. So we're desiring to live good and righteous lives, and all these things will be added unto you. Again, that's not promising that you're going to be wealthy in the way that you think of wealth, right? We're not all going to be an Elon Musk, right? But understanding the principle behind that is what I think is the main point of this teaching.
No, I think that makes all the sense in the world, and obviously that applies. Like you were saying at the beginning, this applies huge today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even myself, same thing. I mean, like right now we're doing businesses, and is it going to work? Am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to pay for this? Am I going to make this happen? And yeah, I still focus on it. And I still work
Mhm.
hard, but it's still that, not that I'm not focused, but it's
Yeah.
like, oh, man, I got to worry about this. I got to do this now. I got to do that.
Yeah.
Is this going to work?
Yes.
And my wife's more of the relaxed, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I got this. I'll take care of it. Like,
And,
I might be my controlling side to me, like,
yeah.
I get control of this.
And I think all of us struggle with that. You know, again, what Jesus is saying, this is not a checkbox, right? It's like, okay, I'm not supposed to be anxious. Check, I made it through today. You know,
Right.
because we're going to feel that. You know, those emotions we're going to feel that anxiety and that worry at times. But again, I view a lot of what he's saying here in all the teaching on the Mount is just stepping back and having perspective, right? Stepping back, and these are all check engine lights. So like when your anger gets aroused, that should be a check engine light, and you go, okay, whoa, where am I headed with this? I need to get this in control. Your lust, whenever all of a sudden you're overcome with that feeling, that's a huge check engine light. Whoa, back up, right? You know, and not a check engine light that, you know, like a lot of my daughters have just don't pay attention to the check engine light, right? Hey, it's still running. No, but there's something maybe we need to look at, right? Well, here's the same thing. When we start getting a little overwhelmed with anxiety, we should step back. Okay, why am I feeling this way, right? Am I putting too much focus into this, or you know, maybe I just need to you know, re-engage with my relationship with Christ to remind me that, hey, even if this business endeavor fails, and acknowledging that it could, right? That I'm still going to be okay. I don't know how, but I know that God will still be with me and
Right.
still lead and guide me. I know, you know, this as we began to start Journey, you know, 10 years ago. I never thought I'd be a church planter, any of that kind of stuff. That's just kind of how, looking back, God moved us to this point. Well, we moved to Elgin, didn't know anybody, you know, had trouble finding even a place to worship, all of those things. And then you're kind of slowly getting going, and a year goes by, and then 2 years goes by, and you've got a little group there. But it's stress and the struggle. And I would have major anxiety and worry about, man, what am I even going to do? How is this going to ever work out? And then you start thinking, God, am I failing? And all this. And I had to step back and say, you know, God has not called us to be successful in a worldly way, right? That is not what he's called us to do.
Point.
And that's in any area of your life. God has not called you to worldly success. He has called you to be faithful to him. And then the results will take care of themselves. And I had to many times step back and say, you know what, this church thing could go up in smoke at any time. I mean, something like 70% of new church plants are not around 5 years later. Right? So you have to acknowledge the reality. You know, part of battling worry and anxiety is being realistic and understanding what can happen, and then say, no, but I'm going to take the challenge anyway. Right? But you better realize what can happen. Right. And so my goal with Journey has always been, it's not to achieve what worldly success would say about a church, but am I being faithful to the church that God has called me to lead? Right. And there's been ups and downs with that, and challenges. But I think we have to keep a bigger perspective like that, or worry and anxiety will consume us. And then that just paralyzes you.
Okay. So that's kind of a good point. So you're talking about when it started, you got the build. What did you go through, or how did this all apply in terms of when COVID hit? Because that smacked churches in the face.
Oh, yes, it certainly did. And that was just an extremely challenging time. Because, and you did worry, because it's like, oh, I can see how all of this can just disintegrate overnight. And it's through no fault of your own, right? It's like, it wasn't my own stupidity, or, it was like, this is just a circumstance that you're in. So I did struggle with worry of, okay, how do we keep division from entering into the church? How do we, keep everybody on the same, like, just, I knew the moment that all of that happened, I knew the church would come under attack, and just in general, but even our church, because Satan is going to use crisis like that to cause chaos and to sow chaos, and so I just had a sense at the very beginning that this is going to be something that is going to sow the seeds of division within churches. I didn't know exactly. I would have never guessed that some of those seeds would be masked, right? And they were.
I see what you're saying.
Masks cause divisions within churches.
People's view on it.
People's view, yes. And because people viewed COVID from different perspectives, and then those perspectives started to fall into political lines, which made it even more difficult. I think the best example, and it was so stupid. At first, there were conservative people that lean conservative that because you had the My Pillow guy and stuff. He's making masks, right? Because at first everybody's just trying to do something to help, right? And so there are all these people ramping up production for masks, and there were conservative people saying, hey, if masks work and let us go back to work so we can get out of these lockdowns, well, everybody just wear a mask, right? Well, then when it became evident that the mask didn't work, then all of a sudden the conservatives were against masks, but that raised up the other side to be even more pro-mask, right? Then you started having the whispers of this vaccine that's coming out, and it was amazing. People on the left side of the aisle would be like, I'm not taking that vaccine. How can you trust this administration, this Operation Warp Speed? Why would you ever take a vaccine from that? Well, then the administration changes, right? And that was the only thing that changed. It was still the same Operation Warp Speed that was begun under the previous administration, but now all the people who were against vaccines are like so pro-vaccine that they hate people who don't take the vaccine. And you're just like, what is happening here, right? I mean, it was just total time of chaos. And as a church, you're trying to navigate those waters, and that was a challenge. I got to the point, I was like, okay, we're just going to do it the way that I feel God is leading us to do. And if you don't like that, okay, there's other places that you can worship. And I'm sorry that we can't meet all of those needs, because we can't. And we did change direction. We changed focus, because I think the spiritual battle really jumped out into the open with COVID. And so we've started talking more openly about that. And that has caused, there's a lot of people that were coming here before COVID who haven't come back, right? And I understand that, because we have changed our direction. And so,
and some people get out of that habit.
That's a lot of it too. Yes. Yeah. No doubt is the habit deal. But you're right. There were lots of times in there I'm worried, I'm anxious about, how are we going to even make this? And then you step back and say, no, you know what? God's going to find a way. I don't know what it looks like.
Right.
But that's a hard one. And so all of us are going to struggle with that anxiety and that worry. There's going to be those moments, but again, view that as a check engine light. Okay. I need to step back. I need to make sure my relationship with Christ is where it needs to be. And then just make the decision. Whatever it is you're worrying about, just make the decision and then move forward, right? Because the reality is most of our decisions that we stress over are not issues of righteousness. They're just issues of how do I best pursue,
Our circumstance.
And how,
Yeah.
what's the best thing? And it's not like most of the time we're not making a decision. Well, am I going to go home and sleep with my wife tonight, or am I going to go pick up a girl at the bar? Okay, on a decision like that you may be having anxiety in, that's a righteous issue, right? That's a moral issue. There's moral clarity, and we should obviously say, no, I think I'm going to be with my wife, right? That's not what most decisions are. They're not clear cut moral right and wrong. It's just what's the best path forward. Sometimes I think we make the mistake of thinking God has laid out this perfect plan for our life, right? And it's our job to make sure we make every decision correct so that we can follow that plan that God has for us. I believe that God does have a plan for our life. He wants us to make a difference in the kingdom of God. However, that can look many different ways. So if you're looking at two different jobs, I can go with this company or this company. Pray about it. Seek God's wisdom. Guess what? He's going to be with you whichever decision you make. Even if you make a decision, as all of us have, and we can go with company A or company B, and we decide to go with company B, and it flames out horrible. It's a horrible situation. Does that mean that God wasn't with you when you made that decision and you went against his will? No, that's just how life works out, right? So we shouldn't get so anxious at all of our decisions and think, man, I've got to make the right one. No, make the right one and then allow God to walk with you through whatever happens, right? Sometimes I think we create our own anxiety in that way.
No, I think what you just said was actually a great, maybe lesson to take from the conversation, for everything, is that point of like, well, I'm just do, but I kind of pull the trigger.
Yes.
I think some of our anxiety lies within that decision-making process, like the fear of failure, or this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
What should I? And we don't pull that trigger, and we just sit there and it just stews on it.
Yes.
And I mean, I talk to a lot of people. Anybody you talk to, you get that feeling. I think that's a good point, that the decision's there, but it's actually to act upon it.
Yeah.
This anxiety just blows up, because once you actually pull that trigger, you actually get a better feeling. Like, okay, on the right track. Let's just make that happen. And you're now forcing yourself just to.
Yeah. So no,
that's a good point.
And I think it's a very important one. And it's kind of like if you're preparing for a major vacation, right? And so you've got all this stuff to do, and then you're going through, and, if you're like me, the morning of, you're like, oh, I guess I need to pack, right? And you're like panicked, trying to get everything organized, and you hope you have everything set up. But the moment you get on the plane and you're in the air, there's kind of like, well, it doesn't really matter if I forgot anything now, because now we're going. And so now we're on to looking forward, and not just all focused on trying to get everything done. And you can just kind of say, okay, well, you know what? Let's enjoy the trip. I think there's an aspect that we need to do that in all areas of our life. Approach those big decisions. You'll know which are the big decisions. Do spend some time, seek his kingdom first, right? How does this decision fit into God's calling me to be a follower of Christ, right? And guess what? You can be a follower of Christ whether you work for company A or company B. You can be a follower of Christ whether you decide to start your own business or decide to be an employee. You can be a follower of Christ if you want to be a lawyer, or if you want to be a garbage man, right? Or if you have no idea what your future holds, and so you're just doing DoorDash and Uber Eats, right? In all of those, you can be a follower of Christ, and don't worry about those types of decisions, because those ultimately, our jobs, our careers, all of that kind of falls under the treasures that eventually are moth and rust destroy, right? Because those are temporary. Have a bigger picture that is leading you and guiding you.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
But well, we're about at 30 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So anything quick that you had?
No, that was also. I'm going to put an example in there because it's funny, even though I study the Bible and all this stuff. It's funny when you sit down and you listen to somebody else talk. Sometimes you get new information.
Yes.
Oh, I never looked at it that way. And then just start talking here, that anxiety things. I mean, because I get it. Not like I don't get nervous.
Yeah. Right.
But there is that maybe that analytical side that I'll be like, okay, if I do it this way, but no, that's not the perfect way. I mean,
Yeah.
it'll create that anxiety. Like, then I'll stall.
Yes.
But when I went back in the military, I was 40 years old, and I wanted to go the SF route.
Yeah.
And I went through talking to different recruiters. Oh, you can't go. You're too old. And finally, someone's like, hey, if you can make it through, we'll do a waiver for age and all this. But you got to pass it on yourself. Like, cool, let's go. And even then, I was like, I mean, it's exciting. I pulled the trigger. Like, I'm doing this. I gave up everything. My job. It's like, and I'm 40. Like, okay, I'm like restarting life. Like, start my life. But I do remember I would only do 1-year contracts. And the thing like, if I fail, they can't keep me. I'm getting out and do something else.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it never left. But the point is, I'm going to go back to what you're saying. Pull the trigger.
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed at sometimes what becomes of pulling that trigger. Now, it may not stay down that same road.
Yeah.
You may go and go, oh, wow, here's another direction I could go.
Yes.
But you're doing that action.
Yeah.
And you're not focused or having anxiety on the things. And obviously this is about focusing on Christ.
Yes.
Making him, worry about him, not everything else, everything else. But because we do live in a society, everything we're anxious about everything.
Yeah.
Money, food, things.
Yes.
That we do have a loss of that focus. But I think the life application, what you're saying, I think is a good thing. Is just pull that trigger, go for it.
Yeah. Rather than having the fear of failure, have the understanding of the reality of failure, that it's possible. So you recognize that, but then you're like, wait, I failed before and God was still with me and it just changed the path I was on. Right. So sometimes failure leads to us going on a different path and a better path. Right. Don't bring every life decision down to, oh, God, there's only one decision that's right in God's eyes. No, you know what? He gives us wisdom. We use that wisdom, and then we continue to seek his kingdom first, no matter what we do. Now,
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And a quote I once heard that I think, I don't know why we always go down weird roads, but is success lies on the other side of inconvenience.
Yes.
And it's that inconvenience, that thought of failure, like, oh, I don't want to deal with it.
Yes. Yeah.
But I don't remember who it was that quoted this, but it was, I don't know, it might have been from the book Rich Man, Poor Man. I don't know if you ever read it.
Yeah, I don't know if I did, but I have heard of that.
Real estate, and his dad, his real dad was super poor. There was that side, and there was his other, his real dad, but his other dad that kind of taught him the business side to it, and to take those chances to do things. Yeah. I think in this book, the quote was, can't remember the guy's name, success lies on the other side of inconvenience. His point was, you're going to run into this roadblock. Yeah. You're going to have this anxiety. Yeah. Pull the trigger, go for it. Now, that book's focusing on real estate, money, and these type of things. Even though I believe he was a Christian too. Yeah. But that was kind of the concept, like to get you in that mind of how to be successful in life. But it still applies that application. Like, what are you focused on? Now, that's business, but real estate. But here, this is focused on Christ. That inconvenience, just keep focusing on him, pull that trigger, and you're going to be okay. Yeah. At the end of the day, he still got you.
Yes, that's exactly right. Sense. Yeah, no, it does. And that he's with you, and that you can be an active participant in the kingdom of God, no matter what your social status, no matter what your economic status. Again, focus on doing that. And then all these things will be added unto you. You will find a peace. You will be able to be content with wherever you are, right? That's the kingdom life that Christ wants for us. He doesn't want us to be living in this constant state of anxiety. That is not coming from him.
That's a good point. And I think because you've been under the whole Sermon on the Mount. I mean, so if you can't just apply just the one single verse, right? But if you look at all the Sermon on the Mount, and even to what we're talking about now, if you're doing all these other things, not your intent. Yes. So if your intent for success or whatever is not to impress somebody, it's not for this, but it's about him and focusing on him. That seems like, I know this kind of rumbling through my head right now. that's a help and alleviation of that anxiety.
Yeah.
Because you're not worried about all these other things that he says, don't worry about them.
Right.
Worry about this.
Yes. And you're playing to that audience of one.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
exactly.
it comes
Which I love how you put that, playing the audience of one.
Yeah.
So it's become something I've said to a few people.
Well, I know I stole that from someone. So, you know, everything is stolen. I don't know exactly who to get what book I read.
But they Phil said this. And,
well, trust me, if you take something that I've said, then it's been stolen twice because, and there is truth there. Right? There's nothing new under the sun. It may just be worded differently or something like that. But all right. Well, it's good to have you today. And tomorrow, Wednesday, at 6:30 here at Journey, Tom is going through Revelation. Going to be hitting the second church, Smyrna, right? And then we'll have a recap of that on Thursday or Friday of this week. And so thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.